Hi, welcome to the channel. I'm Mrs. R. Let's do some math. Today we're talking about evaluating functions. So we already had some videos, hopefully you've watched them already, about continuous functions and discrete functions and what is a function. Now we're going to talk about some notation and how this actually ends up working most often in your algebra class. So with this notation, if you watched the continuous functions video, you saw this real briefly. It looks like f parentheses x. And normally when we see parentheses and things right next to it, we think multiplication. This is not multiplication. This is one piece of notation. It's like one word. You're going to see the f with the x. You won't see the f all by itself. Now, you'll see this in a couple different places. Sometimes you might see it on a graph where you've got your x-axis labeled, and then instead of the y-axis, they put f of x. Sometimes you'll see it in a table. X, f of x. Really, that f of x just means the output of a function of x. And in our other talks, when we talked about outputs of functions, those were always associated with y. So really, y is the same thing as f of x if the relation you're looking at is a function. And we pronounce this f of x. So f is a function of x, but you just read it f of x. So most often, you will see it in your algebra class with an equation where instead of saying y equals 4x plus 2, it says f of x equals 4x plus 2. What this means, kind of breaking this down, this is the rule. This is the relation rule that takes you from an x value that you're either given or you see or you want to test out and takes you to this output y value. Now your input is still just x. You take that input, put it into the rule, and it kind of spits out that output that you want. So with these instructions, we're given a function, and they ask us to find f of 0. Now, that means instead of being f of x, notice they put a 0 in there, right? That means we're testing out x equals 0. If our input is 0, what does our output become? So the first thing you should do is rewrite. So f of 0 now, not f of x anymore, equals 4. And then instead of writing x as our input, they want us to test out 0. And now that we've rewritten, we can just follow our algebra steps, follow order of operations to evaluate this. We should be getting a number answer if it says evaluate in your instructions. So I do 4 times 0, 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. So they wanted us to find f of 0. It turns out f of 0 is 2, which really means the output of this function when the input is 0 is 2. We have a couple more examples we're going to do, but really all this is asking you to do when it says evaluate the function is substitute whatever it gives you here into the input value there. So we have our function now. This is an absolute value function, and we're going to find f of 8. So again, first rewrite f of 8. And then when we see our relation rule, we're going to write down everything just as it is, except anytime you see an x, we're going to write 8. And now we solve. 8 minus 3 is 5. Absolute value of 5 is 5. And 5 minus 5 is 0. So when the input is 8, the output of this function is 0. All right, one more. This is where it could get tricky. Oh, I forgot to say we're finding f of -1. Okay. So we have another function, This time it's a quadratic function. We've got that exponent there. But our input now, we're testing out the input -1. What's the output of this function when the input is -1? So we'll rewrite just like we've been doing. But now, anytime you have a negative, keep it in parentheses just until you see what you have to do with it. So I'm going to do -1 where the x goes, and there's a squared, plus 2, and then -1, because there's another x, so we need another -1. And now I can work on actually doing order of operations, evaluating all of that stuff. So order of operations here does say do parentheses first. There's nothing inside the parentheses that we can do, so we'll move on to exponents. So -1 squared, -1 times -1 does give us a +1. And then multiplication, 2 times -1 is -2. And now we're just to some subtraction. 1 minus 2 is -1, and then -4 would give us -5. So this function was a little more complicated, but we still work the same process. Just be careful if your input that you're testing has a negative in it. So that's been evaluating functions. If this video was helpful for you, please hit that like button so that we can reach more people. If you have any other questions or you want to see any other concepts, please leave a comment and we'll address that as quickly as we can. But ultimately, I'm Mrs. R. This has been me doing math. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.